Somebody whose opinion I have respected. And I told him that I was going to be giving this talk, and I said, Paul, do you agree with me that the golden age is within reach? And he said, I do. He said, I do agree. But, he said, I wonder how the industry is going to screw it up this time. And according to Paul, I said, Paul, what do you mean by that? Well, according to Paul, he said, it all comes down to budget and balls. He said, when it comes to budget, he said, traditionally, we've been marketing stepchild. And among the giant advertising conglomerates like WPP and Omnicom that owns PR firms, I discovered that only about 10% of their revenues come out of their public relations holdings. On the other hand, as I see it, advertising, many of the large advertising agencies, they're like lumbering giants with all their different departments. They have to overcome a very complicated structure to deal with this new advent that we have to work with now. And PR firms, I've always found, tend to be a little more agile. They're kind of like mini factories where we can kind of all do it all. And I believe passionately that good ideas and an ability to craft content and create conversations is a lot more useful than some big lumbering giant when it comes to social media, or giant budgets and little else. Well, as noted before, Paul Holmes said that we need balls, and the balls are in our court. PR people, in my opinion, have always been a little challenged when it comes to taking big industry leadership initiative. And I tend to think sometimes it's because that people who go into this business are a little more of consensus builders. They don't hit people over the head with a big, bold ad. We kind of work the room, you know? And sadly, sometimes this approach, though methodical, can sometimes veer into passivity or risk aversion. And as in the dot-com era, I call it reticence that gave other marketers a head start. But we're really smart people, and our job requires that we have the intellectual chops, really, to be taken very seriously in the boardroom. So what accounts for these lapses? Well, I attribute them to maybe a serious failure of imagination. It's kind of a foible that often afflicts respected experts who overlook opportunities because they're just maybe too close, too wedded perhaps to the status quo. Pardon me, there are two examples here that I found of otherwise really smart business people who totally missed the boat when it came to recognizing an emerging opportunity and really capitalizing on it. And the first one was a man by the name of William Orton, who was president of Western Union, the world's first real communications empire. And he was offered the rights to the telephone in 1877, and he declined, describing Alexander Graham Bell's invention as an interesting novelty with no commercial possibilities. Now, if Orton had been a little more farsighted, we might be sending our cell service bills and signing up for Western Union telephone and telegraph as opposed to AT&T. Now, 100 years later, in 1977, there was a man by the name of Ken Olsen. And Ken was founder, president, and chairman of Digital Equipment Corporation. And he said, there is no reason that anyone would want a computer in their home. You know, I don't think so. Today, I know that 81% of American households, and I don't have the figure on Canada, have home computers. So you probably won't be surprised when I tell you that Ken Olsen and DEC, as it was known, parted ways in 1992, and 6 years later, the company was defunct. So I think we're fortunate in that we've kind of learned from our first experience in the dot-com era, and I think we've made up a lot of lost ground when it comes to social media. And I believe that many digital firms and advertising agencies, I know for a fact that this is true in New York, that many of them are struggling. They can't quite do what we're doing. They're pretending to do what we're doing. And I think some of them are losing traction. I know the guy that heads our whole digital practice came from McCann Erickson. He was a creative director there for 8 years, and the large global advertising agency. And his contention was one of the main reasons he wanted to leave was he just felt that they didn't get it. I think public relations is naturally better suited to this new channel of communications, more so than any other marketing discipline. Okay, I've teased you long enough. Now I want to talk about the 7 reasons that I think the golden age is within reach. So here are the 7 top reasons why. And this is the first one: one world, multiple opportunities. Now, the global village that was first described by Marshall McLuhan back, I believe it was in the mid-60s, is now really no longer a pipe dream. There's no such thing as a purely local or even a national story. Social media were an important element, for example, in the recent protests in the Middle East. And it particularly interested me because one Cairo reporter said this, and I quote, "We use Facebook to schedule the protests, Twitter to coordinate, and YouTube to tell the world." Now, many North Americans watched as these events unfolded on the internet, and they were, no doubt, everybody was inspired by the courage and also yet concerned about the geopolitical implications of possible shifts in power. But I wonder how many of us during this thing, and while it's still going on, have been thinking about the fact that the protesters had a global audience, which is different than in the past. For weeks, though, tens of thousands of Wisconsinites, I'm sure you've heard of that state, Wisconsin, were demonstrating in Madison, Wisconsin, the state capital, against Governor Scott Walker's desire to cut the rights and pay of public union employees. Now, despite this physical distance of about 9,900 kilometers between Cairo and Madison, some of the protesters really found common ground, and I found that really kind of interesting. But I want to add one more layer to this story. There's a little pizza shop called Ian's Pizza in Madison, Wisconsin, that was right down the street from the state capitol where these protests in Madison were taking place. And it became a global pizzeria. Let me explain. As a result of extensive social media coverage that was picked up by much of the mainstream press, such as the New York Times and some of the others, Ian's has been fielding calls from people from every state in the Union. Certainly, I saw evidence in Canada, Egypt, and traced about 23 other countries where people were calling and ordering pizzas to be given to the demonstrators to help them out. And to me, the globalization of information, when you hear an example like this, I know it extends to all of us, at least everybody who is connected to the internet. Now, the Yellow Pages used to define our market. There were, unless you were a major hub like, say, Toronto or Tokyo or New York, clients were mostly confined for many people, not all, except for those major hubs, pretty much to the region in which they lived. Today, it's possible for anyone, anywhere,